Hi folks, and thank you for joining me on the channel, and especially for taking a few minutes to check out this video. Welcome to part 2 of my gear preparation and setup videos. To ensure a safe and enjoyable scuba diving experience, we must focus on ours and our dive buddies' gear preparation and setup. Diving requires you to be in the moment, to concentrate and focus what you're doing. And that's why we sometimes ask divers, put away your cell phones, focus on this preparation, this step. A lot of problems that I've seen could have easily been avoided through the proper preparation of the gear for diving. Now, in this series of 4 parts, I covered gear preparation, your BCD and tank preparation, as well as your weight systems integration. This is part 4 or part 2 of the scuba part, and this is the scuba gear setup and preparation at the dive site, for example. Now, I will mention, of course, that there is no one best way to do everything, and this system that I use is simply one that I've been using for many years. It has kept my students and the recreational divers that have joined me on trips safe, and ideally avoiding certain types of problems like tanks slipping off of the BCD as you dive and buddies having to come to you and help fix it and so on. Important checks that you would have done on your gear as to the dive worthiness might be made at the dive store or a few days before the morning of the dive, unless of course you're picking up rental gear. It is important to check it at the dive store, but more so when you get to the dive site. As you do your checks, you can make sure that everything's working properly and connected and set up properly. So enough with the preamble, let's get our gear ready and set up. Let's go. So as my buddy Dinesh says, we may trust, but when it comes to our breathing gas mixture, we also want to verify. I did that at the dive store yesterday, and there was 36% oxygen in my tank at 3300 psi. So I just scribbled out and put a piece of sticky tape on it. And that's important for you to know what's in your tank. Now, remove the valve cover if there is one. That will usually be sitting right at the top here. And when we finish a dive, I usually leave mine off completely so that I know my tank was used and is no longer full. Now, you want to check for the presence of an O-ring. That's a rubber gasket or seal. Now, that's mine here, and it's a black colored one. You can have a clear silicone or you can have a brown colored one. And they're different colors, of course, indicating some of the vital and different materials, for instance. Make sure there are no cracks or nicks in this O-ring and it's not worn out. Otherwise, you're going to get leakage from here. You could also check your air for smell or taste. What I usually do is I put my hand right here, crack the valve slightly. Now, you're always open to you, and give a smell and just see what it smells like. There shouldn't be any smell. And of course, you removed any dust or moisture from the inside of the stem of the valve. Now let's take a look at what happens if you got a little bit of water here. If you didn't get rid of it by cracking the valve slightly, then you can put that water or moisture into your first stage of your regulator. So let's see what that may look like. So if your tank was in the bay well of the boat, maybe, or it was raining perhaps, when you crack your valve, if you look here, you'll see as I crack it, a little bit of moisture comes out. That was sitting in the stem of the valve. When you put your first stage here and you open this, you wouldn't want that water to be pressurized and pushed into your first stage. Where the air goes into and out of the tank is considered the front of it. And I suggest addressing the tank from behind. So I'm standing behind, square in line with the valve. If you do this, then you always open the valve towards you. An easy way to remember it is I need air, so I turn the valve to me, and that gives me air. Now, I've seen and heard dive buddies helping each other with one standing in the back of the buddy. They've got the gear on, they can't see the buddy in the back, and they're fiddling with the valve, muttering and murmuring, which way do I open it? Is it this way or is it this way? That's the last thing you need to hear, giving you that sense of feeling of confidence as your buddy is not knowing whether he's turning your air on or off as you get into the water. So that's what you want to avoid. So my next step is to attach my tank and BCD together. So I am using a different one that I used in the other video, and this one, just so that you get the experience of both, this one uses this this buckle type where it's already sort of pre-adjusted, and I have it pre-adjusted for an 80 cubic foot tank. So I'm just going to slip that into the slot here. I'm going to bring this over my tank like this, bring it down, and this one is simple. I can adjust the height roughly from what I know, bring it over here, and I just lock it in place. That's done. This one is important. This catches and connects this to the upper part of the tank valve, so this is secure in place, and I showed you in the other video how to double check that. At this point, what I normally do is check to make sure all the parts that are screwed into the BC are firmly attached and they're not slipping and coming off. Also, this side you could just double check that. You've got a dump valve at the back, and I double check that. And I'll also just run through my hoses, make sure there's no visible cuts or tears or damages or sort. And what I sometimes do is just give this a little press, and there should be no squishy, squingy movements, and it shouldn't be sticking for sure. Then we want to attach the regulator. My regulator comprises a first stage, a primary second stage, and a brighter colored alternate air source. It's also got a low pressure inflator hose here, and of course a submersible pressure gauge, that's this one, and a depth gauge or computer. And this is all together on a console. At the back of it I have a slate, and I can use an ordinary lead pencil to write messages to my buddy as necessary. The regs have either a DIN first stage or a yoke system. This one is the yoke system, and it keeps a rubber cover in place to prevent dust or moisture from getting into your system here, which has springs and so forth. And you don't want water in there, because then it's going to dry, and if it's salty it's going to corrode and stick the springs. And when you ask the regulator for air by breathing into the mouthpiece, it's not going to give you the air because it's all blocked up in here. So that's why we don't want dust or moisture in here. So to use this, first of all, back off your yoke screw. Back off your yoke screw like this, and that's going to allow you to move your dust cover. And I want to take a quick look inside here, make sure it's not green and discolored, indicating that salt water was on the inside of that. So I don't want water, salt water, anything here, and causing it to causing the saltwater corrosion and this sticking, because when you want your air to go through here into your system, you're not going to be able to get it in there because it's blocked at this point here. So to connect my system, what I am going to do is I'm going to place, if I'm addressing it from behind, then I've got already the correct orientation such that my mouthpieces are over my right shoulder and they'll come to my mouth here. So that's already the right orientation. That's perfect. So now what I want to do is I want to just place my yoke and first stage over my tank valve like this. I have to back it up some more, and the o-ring, or where the air goes into and out of the valve, meshes or mates with your first stage here. Now what I do is, when you turn this tension or torque will cause this yoke to close and jam the open close wheel. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually put my left hand thumb over here, so that keeps the yoke on the other side from opening here. So I've just got the thumb sticking down here to block it from moving. I'll just show you that quickly. So I've got my thumb here preventing it from moving. So let's go back this way. Right, so now bring this up, make it snug. You don't have to tighten it, over tighten and squeeze the o-ring. Just bring it finger tight and stop. After you've got to that stage, before you turn on your air, what you want to do is you want to connect your low pressure inflator hose. While there's no pressure on the system as yet, connect your low pressure inflator hose. So let's see how that works. I use a dive alert, which is an air horn. So once I've got air in the tank, I can blow an air horn. I connect this system to the same hose. Now it's a quick release, so take 3 fingers in the palm of the hand and hold the hose like this, pull back on the clip. So I'm going to pull it like this, and I'm going to reach in and just click it and lock it in place. After I've done that, then I'm going to take this assembly and I'm going to place it into my low pressure inflator mechanism. So I'm just going to pull back on this clip, pull back on it, and push this in, and it should click and lock. If it doesn't click and lock, it's not properly put in. I'll leave it off just for a moment. Let's pretend that I didn't put it on properly, and it looks like it's in, but it's actually not. Let's see how that works. So I've got that there. Now what you want to do is stay on your left side, and I'm going to take my gauge and I'm pointing it to the tank, not to me or my buddy. If this was used and it's going to shatter for any reason, that's 3000 psi. Your car tire holds 30 psi. So this is 100 times the pressure of your car tire. So you don't want this damaging anybody. So what you do is point it here. Now open slowly towards you, as you know. Open slowly. You feel the pressure building in the line. Open all the way. Now open, 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 till you can't open anymore. And then what I do is I turn back just a touch or slightly. I'm not turning back a quarter or half turn, all the way and back just a touch. If you've ever worked on the inside of these valves as I do, certified to do, then you'll see turning back just a slight touch helps to relieve the pressure on the Teflon seat in here. Right? Before you go any further, check to see how much air you have. So this one has 3300 psi is indicated, and I can depress the button to start and make sure the computer is working and operational. So I just make sure it goes through, scrolls through the functions and it runs, everything's good. Now before you put this down, take your hand and run it on that high pressure hose with pressure on it, just to make sure that there's no swelling and no lumps indicating that the hose is going. Now come to the next item on your left side, and what you'd want to do is depress the low pressure inflator button and make sure air goes into the system, and what you're seeing is nothing happening. So this wasn't connected properly. Now even though there's pressure on the line, I could still connect it, just have to push in a little harder and click and lock it. And now look at this, air is going into the system. There should be no sticking here, because that can indicate a problem, and when you're out in the open water, if that sticks with air going in, it'll cause you to run away to the surface, a runaway ascent. Double check, let out the air, so I press on the top button and you hold it above your head, of course. Then I come over to my right side and I'll pick up my hose, my alternate air source hose. Again, I run my hand down the length of the hose, come to the mouthpiece, just press the purge button, check to make sure it works. And you could also at this stage, I recommend that you check your mouthpiece, make sure it's not bitten through, and also check to make sure there's no holes. Now I did see a hole, look at that, there's a hole right here. Usually in training what will happen is as you pass it to your buddy and it goes this way, there's a little bit of a pull on the diver by the mouth, and that's where you get the hole in it. And ideally you want to change that before you go into the water and use this system. I'll just come briefly to the other one. This is the other, and this is your primary air source, the one you're going to breathe from. Usually the darker colored one. Run your hand down the braid and there is an issue here. This one here has a nick, and that is a little bit of an issue, but not much, because this is just the covering. There is a good story to this one. This is where one of the shark on one of the shark dives got his tooth a little too close and got this nicked here. It's a very, very funny, interesting story, but I don't have time to tell you here. Also check your mouthpieces here, make sure it's not bitten through, and also the ends, make sure there's no holes here. After we've done all these checks, I then would place my second stages on the inside of my BCD, like there, and also on this side my gauge on the inside. And I'm going to put my tank into the tank rack if you're on a boat and secure it so it's not going to fall. There are waves out there and water movement, and it's going to throw it down, and it's going to land on your foot, or it's going to end up in the sea. The other thing about this is that if you're on the shore and you're doing a shore dive, for instance, like I am, then you want to put it to lay on the back of the tank like this rather than on the BC, and somebody put something on it and damage and crack your BCD. So put this to lay down on the tank itself like that. In closing, if I had a problem with the mouthpiece, then what I may do is I may carry in my spare parts save a dive kit, I carry a couple mouthpieces and a couple tie wraps, so I can just go ahead and change this out and replace that one. I would like to thank you for sticking with me this far. I do hope that this video has provided some bits of information to you and maybe acted as a refresher even, and keep you safe for when you're diving. Now, if you did find any information here useful, feel free to give me a little click of that like, and if you haven't already done so, please do go ahead and subscribe down below and see other videos like this, all related to diving, free diving, and so on. So I've enjoyed bringing this to you. I hope to see you soon. Be safe, dive safe, and stay well. Bye now.